Okay. Hi. Very welcome to
Hello
everyone.
to you.
Hi. Chisato, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for making the time to participate in this conversation. I'm really looking forward to this, mainly because it's very rare that we get the opportunity to speak with creators who are creating and seeing work and their work from such a different perspective to other creators and other artists. My name is Alejandra Shapaniak. Please refer to me as Ale, as in ale, as in the beer that you drink. It'll make it easier for you. I am the arts director for Chile.
That's very sweet, calling you Ale.
I thought you might like it. And I have been arts director for Chile for the British Council for 7 years. And throughout that time, I have been motivated to include as much work made in the UK as possible and make that work available to Chilean audiences. Partnership that the British Council has forged with GAM here in Chile is instrumental and crucial in that relationship and in that opening up of audiences, Chilean audiences to British work and work that is being produced in the UK. It's a real treat being able to speak to you directly and talk a little bit about your work and the background to it, as well as telling you a little bit about the expectations of what this brings up in local audiences. Sorry, Peter.
Hello. Hello, everyone in Chile. I've just been taught a little bit of Chilean Sign Language. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Chisato Minamimura. My sign name is this, just touching the end of my nose. And now I am going to use sign language, and I'm using British Sign Language. And we have a voiceover, and that's from a man, and that person's name is Peter Abraham. Now, I'm very happy to be in this discussion. I'm really happy to be talking to Ale. I'm very, very happy to show my Scored in Silence work to a Chilean audience.
We are very delighted that you're here. I just wanted to give you a little bit of context. Every 2 years, the British Council puts together a British Council showcase, which is a sprinkling of sorts of works that have been selected by the British Council to partake of the showcase. And this show was part of that showcase in 2019. It was a very special show. I know it sounds strange, but it does, it makes a lot of sense to seeing a show like yours for a non-English speaking audience. So for me, it makes, there is something quite natural in being attracted to works that don't necessarily rely on speech. And so it made for very interesting programming. And Pamela from GAM went to see this show and was really taken by it and really touched. And I will give you a little bit of also context.
Thank you for that. That's a nice compliment.
And one of the things that is really key in your show is that Chile's history has also been marked by bombing, and that has marked a before and after in our contemporary history, very recent history. And in fact, this conversation will air on the 11th of September, which is the anniversary of the bombing of the coup d'etat that occurred in 1973 here in Chile. So it is very symbolic, and we share these sort of key historical moments. So I wanted to begin the conversation with you. How do you choose, or how did you come to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing as the inspiration for your work, in also observing how that affected a perhaps forgotten segment of our society?
Okay. Now, that's a good starting point, actually. About 3 or 4 years ago, as you know, I live in London now, in Britain. And from Britain, I flew to Japan. And while I was a woman, and she'd been through the experience of the atomic bomb, and she told me her story. And it really had an effect on me hearing this story. It really did have an impact. And the reason it had this impact on me was because I think it's similar to the Chilean experience. Now, every summer in Japan, people who've been through the atomic bomb experience, those people relay their stories again. They talk about their experiences, they keep them alive, and it's in the news, and it's in the newspaper, and it's on TV and the internet, many different media formats. And we take in these stories and we show respect to the survivors of the atomic bomb and the war, and we realize how terrible it was. It reinforces how terrible it was and the need for peace. Now, I thought I knew these stories, but then I realized there was such a difference between this deaf person and the generations of hearing people. It was always hearing people relaying their stories. And I realized there was nothing about deaf people. And their experience was entirely different. For example, when this old deaf lady was telling me about her experience and she saw the bomb explode, she said it was beautiful. And I was really shocked by this adjective, because you don't think really, and in terms of the over the course of this time that you describe it as beautiful. But then I realized the deaf experience was very different, and they'd missed a lot of information, or they'd been ignored. They didn't know what happened, so they just saw something beautiful. And I thought, this is worth keeping. This is deaf history. And that's when I decided that I was going to start to create this project on deaf history of the bomb.
That's amazing. I'm just curious, when you speak in Japan, do you speak in Japanese sign language?
Well, I use both. Like obviously now, for Peter's sake, I'm using British Sign Language because it needs to be English. I'm sorry. I can't do Chilean Sign Language. I'm really sorry about that. So hopefully I could learn that. But obviously I would be using British Sign Language.
Fantastic.
And then obviously when I'm in Japan, I would be using Japanese Sign Language.
Is there a different sign for bomb in Japan than there is in Britain? Is it very different?
Now, in British Sign Language, we do it like this, so you can see my body language there. But in Japan, their sign language is this one, bomb. So you see it actually falling from the sky. And I chose that one. I chose the Japanese sign. That's the one I wanted to use, like that kind of explosion, or their sign. Do you know that I was just wondering, actually, what the Chilean sign for bomb would be?
We'll have to ask Ivan later on. I can find out for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll go through some of the questions that that we've thought about after seeing your play. In your work, you involve a series of languages and forms of communication. What has that experience been like of working with audiovisual creators and musical composers and the choreography and the BSL? How does that whole gamut of people and creatives inform the work that you actually write and the dramaturgy behind your work?
I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a long answer to that, so please be patient with me, okay? Really, scored in silence, my work, it uses a great many materials. We've got the film, we've got the photography, we've got the captions, we've got the lighting, we've got BSL, British Sign Language, and we've also got sign mime, or it's commonly known as VV, visual vernacular, okay? Now, the sound of music and vibrations, that's very important in the show. And that the reason for that is because we use so many materials from the history of my work, from the history of my experience. Now, please don't ask me my age, okay, relating to my experience. But I used to be a choreographer. And what I would do is translate. I would translate the sound of music. I would change that into a visual format. And obviously, because I'm deaf, I can't hear the music. I didn't know how or what the sound of music is, but I'm interested in it. So at the start, I would read books, and those books would be about music, and it'd be about composers and musical composition. Now, for example, Joanne, I'm just getting the spelling, or different composers. I would read their books, and they would all say that music really is similar to maths, okay? And I looked at that and I thought, I can't understand music because I'm deaf, but I do get maths. I get maths. So what I'm going to do is work out a format, a mathematical format, to create a score. And then I'm going to give that to dancers. And I'm going to ask the dancers to become that musical instrument, whether it was a violin, a flute, or whatever. And then I was going to watch that visual representation of music, watch the dancers' rhythm, watch their movement, their placement, see the dancers create this wave, this feeling of the music. And then that would mean the sound of the music isn't only sound. I opened it all out. Obviously, you have sound. And then there are two sides to it, really. Okay. Now, my other work, I'm a BSL art guide. And I do that in museums, different places, in galleries, like the British Museum, for example, or the Tate Museum, lots of different museums. And I'm very interested in researching art. The people, who the artist was, what their work was, facts about them. And I take that and I use it to influence the way I present their work as a guide. And using this and my deafness, I thought, what does this mean? What does it mean? I'm deaf and I've got these senses. Well, have I got a sensory disability? Because I certainly don't have a physical disability. Now, humans, as you know, we all have 5 senses, okay? So we have sight, we have taste, we have smell, we have the sense of hearing and the sense of touch. And it's like a kind of star, and these 5-pointed stars, and the points are each of our senses. But when I looked around at people, I realized people aren't the same. We don't all have the same sensory star. For example, some people hear very well, a very acute hearing, but then maybe their sense of touch is very weak and they don't have any reliance on it at all. So that means one point of their star may be sharper than another point or more angular than another point, representing that particular sense. Somebody's sense of smell might be brilliant. They can smell a cake in the distance, and then they might not be able to see something very well. So it creates different shapes of their stars depending on their strength and what particular sense. Now, me, I can't hear. So my star doesn't have a point for the sense of hearing. So I wanted to show from a deaf perspective. And what I would do then was add digital technology to help create this powerful sense and change and become a different art form to what normally was used to present music. So I was using all these influences to merge to become my work, which was called, as you know, Scored in Silence.
Beautiful, thank you.
You're welcome.
There is a real element to composition, and there's a melody to your work that is quite visual. In the original piece, you included a sensory component that the audience was asked to wear a belt, a vibrating belt. What do you think is lost when we do these things virtually on screen, by not being able to have that element, that sensory element involved in the play?
Okay, yeah. Now, when you see the live performance, I decided, as you said, to offer the audience this belt. And the name of this vibrating belt is called a woojer, W-O-O-J-E-R. And I have one, which I'm holding up now, which is a black belt with a red stripe on it and a curly wire. And it has a button in the middle, which you press. I'm just pressing it now. Okay, and I know that it's working because I can feel a vibration. Okay, now this helps the sound of the music to become a vibrationary element to the show. Because I wanted to show that the sound of the music isn't the only way to know the music. You can get the vibrations as well. So we had 50 of these woojers. And it didn't matter if you were deaf or hearing, we would give out these woojers to all of the 50 audience. And it was a challenge because it was a different way for them to experience how they might normally. Now, you've asked me with the film, without the woojers, is anything lost? Okay. To be honest, I know altogether, I know that everyone won't have the woojers. I know that's not going to happen, okay? So I had a discussion with my sound artist, and this gentleman was named Danny Bright, and I had a discussion with him about it. And he said, okay, now with the live performances, we've got the sound of the music, and then we also have the film, and that's also got music, but they have different music in each. And the reason for that is when we have the woojer, when we use that to translate the music, the technology is in the process of being perfected. It's not perfect at the moment, okay? It's something we're experimenting with. And the woojer, when you use it, Danny created 2 different ways of hearing the music, as opposed to having the woojer and not having the woojer, the live show and the film, okay? So when you hear the music through the film, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to show Scored in Silence live show, and then you can see or hear the difference of having a woojer or not having a wuja, but they're both completely different. The music was different for each. So I would love for you, if you see the live show and the film, to let me know what you thought, if the difference, if there was any, or if you let me know what you enjoyed or what you found interesting in comparing the both.
I didn't wear the wuja when I saw the show, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what that was like. But mainly because I had lots of bags and coats with me on the day and so forth. So, but it seemed like a really interesting way of making people experience something that we are used to very lazily appreciating audibly, physically, and making something that is normally another available to us is a really fascinating topic. Is like when people try and describe, you close your eyes and people describe a painting to you that you're very familiar with, and all of a sudden by not having to rely on what you're looking at, you immediately become more available for other ways of seeing without necessarily seeing, so, or looking. So I found it fascinating because I actually thought how my way of interpreting your work was completely based on somebody who can actually hear and who can actually speak. And so I kept on thinking, I wonder if she's making this more poignant simply because she needs to make up for not being able to hear. And it's not a point for you because you've never been able to hear. So you're not trying to make up for something that has never been there. And it's a really fascinating way of also looking at my own prejudices. And I can imagine it's not just me. We've had this discussion even with Pamela from GAM when we were talking about the possibilities of these sorts of works coming to Chile and to speak to an audience that may not be familiar with, obviously clearly not BSL language, but also not necessarily see work made by a deaf artist. So I just thought, does that affect, do you think of your audience, and who do you think of as your audience when you're creating pieces such as this?
Okay, me thinking about of an audience. Okay, now Scored in Silence, really. It's from a deaf perspective, definitely. And it's deaf-led. The creative process is deaf-led. My team is all hearing. However, they understand that this show is from a deaf perspective, and it is a different perspective. And they are following my ideas. I'm leading on this. So this means Scored in Silence is a deaf experience. It's a deaf sensory experience. So that's why, for example, when we wear the wujas, hearing people are kind of like taken in by it as well. And it's like a unique experience, a very personal experience for them as well. And then deaf people, the same. They've never imagined it to be this way before. And they think, oh, wow, I can feel the effect of the music merging in with the play. And they're two different perspectives. And you've got these perspectives making up a whole, and all of this comes from this little box. But then it's different perspectives looking at this little box of experiences, and we're seeing it from our different perspectives, and we're sharing an understanding of it as well. Now, Britain's great for this because Britain encourages deaf and disabled artists. And I'm lucky to be able to work here. And I was lucky to get this opportunity as well. And then I hope to encourage, through my work, I hope to encourage more people to do similar things, to share and learn from each other, to share and learn new things.
GAM, the venue where this is through whom we are actually showing your work, have been involved in for some years now in a program that's called Incluye, which means include. And it is a program aimed at opening up the spectrum of show and arts and culture to a audience with a disability, any disability, and to be as inclusive as possible, both in programming and access to that programming as possible to the broadest range of audiences available, and who can go to GAM, which is also in a particularly central part of Santiago. And as it was described to you earlier, it is a mix of different art forms under the one roof, but predominantly performing arts. So I wanted to ask you, did you ever think that your work would be seen in a country on the other side of the planet, Spanish speaking, with different opposing seasons? And we would be having this conversation about your work today.
I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And also to hear the Chilean history as well, the Chilean experience, to learn about that, to know what their work could be. I mean, the fact is we're all human, we're all the same. And we can all show something to each other through our arts. Do you agree with that? We can do that, can't we?
It's the crux of my work at the British Council.
Absolutely, true.
I'm curious to know. I don't know how much you know about Chile's history, but would you encourage? No, I'll start again. The Chilean theatre experience and the theatre making experience has been incredibly marked by the 1973 coup. And that 1973 coup triggered 17 years of a dictatorship government in Chile that obviously has had repercussions up until today. Similar to the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that still has repercussions up to today. It is often said that by lots of people who want to turn the page and move on with life and let bygones be bygones, that we should not sort of reminisce so much and base so much of our current life on past experiences. What would you say as a creator who has honed in on such a painful episode, albeit, as you described earlier, beautiful episode for some in terms of the experience? What would you say to people who say that we should turn the page and move on from something as emblematic as this?
So I just think, what's that person's life? What is their life? What are they growing up to? Are they only thinking, oh, I have a lovely little life, you know? people's lives are mixed with up and downs, with positives, with negatives. You can't ignore what's gone on in the past. You can't. You absolutely can't. There's been these experiences, these terrible things that have happened, but they hone the person they hone the people into what they become today, whether it's positive or negative. It's really important to look back. It's looking back at people's personal histories, at global history. It's very important to become the people we are today. And then otherwise people will be worse. We have to learn. And from learning about the past, for example, not ignoring what happened, then we can think about peace. You can't ignore bombs. You can't ignore war. If you did, then how can you create peace?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. In terms of the actual bombing as an experience, it is really poignant in your work. The way that darkness is described and the way that that temperatures are described and the testimonials, the process of getting those testimonials together. How was that process? What did you have to go through in terms of research in order to come to those incredible stories told from such a different perspective to what we're usually used to?
Okay. There was three, really. There was three people it was based on, really, all three things that it was based on. The facts of the story with America and with Japan and the Second World War, okay? Now, I visited Hiroshima. I visited the Peace Memorial there, and I had a look around, and that has many examples of the testimonials that have been saved. And I researched in that particular building. And I picked very important, or to me, important historical moments from that. And I kept that. And then also, like I said before, I met with death survivors and found out their specific stories, and I filmed them. And each of them, they might talk for an hour or so, or I may be filming them over a 2-day process. And all of them told me their stories, and they were priceless, the stories that they told me. And I really tried to edit and pick how I could use particular moments of their stories in my show. And then a third concept of it was after the bomb. What happened after the bomb? Those were my main three, really: the war, the people, and what happened after the bomb.
With something like this that marks a country and marks a people forever, as you said already, is there a way that you can that you can see that your work would always be slightly informed or affected by history in order to deal with healing, or is that something that is just specific to this work?
Ali, I'm sorry, this is me, the interpreter, Peter. Can I just clarify that question? I didn't quite understand it. I'm sorry.
Of course. No, I'm just wondering if this sort of key moment in history is something that would influence all of Chisato's work, or just this specific work?
Only that work. Are you affected from bombing all your work? Your work affected from history of the bomb. Just one show. What do you feel as a Japanese person? You always affected from bomb history. Okay, yes.
Yes.
As a Japanese person, always
I can try and explain it a little bit if you
Now,
prefer.
actually, as a Japanese person, Hiroshima happened, and and Nagasaki. Okay, let me start again. Okay. As a Japanese person, I know that there's been these 2 atomic bombs that happened, one in Hiroshima and one in Nagasaki. And they're historical events, but they're with me. Now, as a deaf person, like deaf old people, for example, who've experienced the bomb, and when they told me their experiences of the bomb, that had a bigger impact on me, because obviously we're the same. We're both deaf. And that kind of gave me a greater awareness of the impact of the bomb. So I'd say it's painful for me, because I have to imagine that if I'd been born in that time, I would have gone through that experience. I would have suffered like my ancestors. So I do understand that. And now in my life, I do have some pain. It's not an easy life, but compared to what people went through in the atomic bomb, it was a far greater time of suffering.
Mm.
Does it affect your work? Always affect your work. And I wouldn't say it affected my work. I would say it affects my life more.
Great, thank you. One of the reasons why I was asking this is because I do feel that there is a responsibility that befalls artists and creatives in particular in putting, creating languages and creating stories that can make understanding our identities and our past and our history in a better, perhaps easier way. Do you feel that weight on your shoulders, particularly as a deaf artist?
Okay, let me think about that. How am I going to answer that? Let me just have a quick moment to think about that. Okay. Now, deafness is my identity. I am a deaf person. So I want to show that through my art and through my performance. So I'm showing my different elements of the fact that I'm a woman, that I'm Japanese, that I'm deaf. So I'm always showing those elements in my work. Everything's linked. Everything's linked within my work.
And do you feel that this, I mean, I have my own, obviously my own opinion, and it actually does affect the way I do my work. But does it affect the way that you think arts should explore lives and stories because you are a deaf artist, or do you feel that you're an artist first and a deaf artist second?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And it's, I have a kind of similar question for you. Do you feel you're Chilean first, or a performer, or an artist first? What do you think?
that's why the question came up, because I was actually thinking about how I would define myself. Even I'm not a performing artist of any sort, but I do define myself first as a woman, and then second as a mother, and then probably as a professional. So, and I thought, how does that, and I'm not affected by anything sort of external that might define me, either by myself or by society's standards. So in terms of a disability, so to speak. So I just wondered how that affects you, whether you feel like you just need to create and you're just creating from a deaf space, or it is something that is crucial to the way that you create.
Well, I'm deaf, and that's always going to be a factor in my creativity, in my creative process. For example, when I was choreographing, my aim in my choreography was I wanted to translate sound into a visual format, and I wanted to start a deaf way of seeing and feeling dance through music. And what I found interesting was hearing people would think, now deaf people should do this, and as a deaf person you should do that, and I rebelled instinctively against that. And I thought, no, my deafness is my freedom. I have a different independent perspective on this. Now I enjoyed researching this, and I enjoyed looking at this, and then I wanted to show through artistic performance, and I was very lucky to have this medium to show.
Fantastic. I wondered about that, because I often think about it in terms of, you know, do you have to write plays because you're a woman, from a woman's perspective, and so and I'm sure that, you know, men don't get asked. So I just thought it would bring another layer to all of this. Chisato, we're gonna come to a close. Is there anything that you would like to add, or that you would like to comment on from for this and for your Chilean audiences who would have just seen this today?
I just want to say a big thank you for watching Scored in Silence, for watching my film. I really hope something from my work, you got something that will make you think, that will make you remember something to ponder on. And then hopefully in the future I can meet you. Please give me feedback on what you thought or what you got from my show and what you took away from it.
Fantastic. I want to thank you on behalf of Centro Cultural Gabriela Mistral, GAM, for allowing us to speak to you and to see you and to see your work and your creation. And I wanted to thank you on behalf of the British Council as well for making my job just that much more richer and more beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you too. Thank you so much, and goodbye to you.